On March 14, 2020, the S&P 500 reached an all-time high of 3380 points, setting a new record. The events of the following week would transform the globe forever, and this was reflected in the index as well. The market fell almost straight down for the next month, losing about 31% before beginning its historic recovery. The world seemed to be in a bizarre place at that moment. So how did we end up with an inflationary economy to begin with? But first, if this is your first visit to our Smart Stocks Academy channel, let me welcome you. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell next to it to be the first to know when a new video like this is released. So if you're ready, let's start talking about the topic. Inflation was the last thing on everyone's mind, but after a tremendous influx of printed money and the stock market's miraculous comeback, many began to wonder. Is it really possible for the government to just click a button and make catastrophic recession vanish without any lingering effects? It wasn't long before analysts predicted that inflation would chip away at the purchasing power of the United States. These individuals, however, were in the minority. When it all started in mid-2020, many of the world's most powerful financial people believed that inflation would never materialize. The tune changed only after we witnessed cannabis, property values, and even their own CPI statistics rise. This was the story now.
And so I actually have a couple of things I'd like to say about inflation, including addressing your question. So with a little bit of context, we're making our way through an unprecedented series of events, really, in which a synchronized global shutdown is now giving way to widespread reopening of economies many places around the world. During this time of reopening, we are likely to see some upward pressure on prices, and I'll discuss why. But those pressures are likely to be temporary as they are associated with the reopening process. And an episode of one-time price increases as the economy reopens is not the same thing as, and is not likely to lead to, persistently higher year-over-year inflation into the future, inflation at levels that are not consistent with our goal of 2% inflation over time.
The Fed's narrative quickly became concentrated on the word transitory. Surely there is inflation, but it is just temporary, and once the economy opens up, everything will return to normal. But this has not been the case as we've witnessed over the last few months. Inflation is still on the rise. Over the summer, we saw that our own measurements soared to new highs. As a consumer, you've most likely experienced supply constraints. Try getting an appliance or a piece of furniture and you'll see what I mean. Summer 2021 has passed, yet supply shortages have persisted. These impediments have not been cleared, and the government is now making a new effort. They have exhausted practically all viable narratives and are now down to only one. Inflation is actually a good thing, according to the new wave. Today, different papers and famous politicians are claiming that inflation will benefit the average person by rising salaries and increasing the value of property. They want inflation to appear to be a high-class problem. Listen to Jen Psaki discuss this in detail.
Inflation is skyrocketing, as I don't need to tell you. The prices for home heating costs, cars, groceries, furniture, rent, gasoline are hitting Americans right in the wallet. The White House response has been generally to say, hey, inflation shows that we're coming out of the recession, so it's a good sign. President Biden's chief of staff, Ron Klain, enthusiastically retweeted an economist who had said in part most of the economic problems we're facing, inflation, supply chains, et cetera, are high-class problems. Now, I get the larger point that when we're talking about economics, we're coming out of a recession. But doesn't it seem tone-deaf to say that rising prices and empty grocery store shelves are high-class problems? Isn't that a bit dismissive?
Well, that's not exactly what the tweet said, nor the retweet of the original tweet, which is what we're talking about here. It is true, though, Jake, and economists will tell you this, and I know you've interviewed some of them as well, that the fact is the unemployment rate is about half what it was a year ago. So a year ago, people were in their homes, 10% of people were unemployed, gas prices were low because nobody was driving, people weren't buying goods because they didn't have jobs. Now more people have jobs, more people are buying goods, that's increasing the demand. That's a good thing. At the same time, we also know that the supply is low because we're coming out of the pandemic and because a bunch of manufacturing sectors across the world have shut down, because ports haven't been functioning as they should be. These are all things we're working through. What people should know is that inflation is going to come down next year. Economists have said that. They're all projecting that. But we're working to attack these cost issues that are impacting the American people every single day. But there's different issues in different sectors, and many of the ones you mentioned.
Jen can press these issues, but the public is finally aware of the situation. Inflation has gone from an arcane topic discussed largely in college classes to mainstream news, thanks to memes like this. The major question is, where do we go from here? As you watch this video, the government's most recent CPI number shows a 5.4% increase in prices over the previous year. This may not appear to be a large sum, yet it is one of the greatest in recent memory. In fact, many people believe that this figure is deceiving. Over the last 3 decades, the federal government has modified the way it analyzes inflation several times. Let's just say that these adjustments have always resulted in lower inflation figures. If the old methods were used now, the results would be frightening. Looking at this graph, you can see that if the 1980 approach was used, inflation would be about 15%, nearly 3 times greater than the official estimate today. This is why some analysts, including Peter Schiff, believe that the year 2021 would start out worse than the country's famed inflationary period in the 1970s. His perspective is startling, and if you watch his most recent Fox News interview, he provides a way ordinary people may protect themselves from this enormous force that destroys your purchasing power. Give it a listen.
Peter, I follow your work. You have been warning about the dangers of inflation for eons now. Wages are not rising as fast as inflation. So it's pretty simple math, Peter. If your wages are going up, say, 2%, and inflation is 3 to 5%, you're losing money. I mean, sooner or later, we're all going to be eating cat food if this continues.
Well, that's generally the trend with inflation, is the price of labor never keeps up with the price of stuff. But the real problem is that immediately after COVID, a lot of Americans stopped working. But unfortunately, they didn't reduce their spending because the government made the mistake of replacing the incomes they lost with new money that the Federal Reserve was printing. So we were making fewer things to buy, but everybody had more stuff, more money to buy stuff. And so prices just went ballistic, and they're going to keep going up. But one way that the average American can try to avoid it is to stock up now. I mean, buy the things that you think you may need a year from now, 2 years from now. Buy it now, especially the stuff that's non-perishable, because in the future, stuff is going to be even in shorter supply than it is now, but the prices are going to be much higher. So why wait for the prices to go up? Just buy the stuff you need now while it's available and a lot less expensive than it's going to be pretty soon.
As you can see, Peter believes that the cost of ordinary commodities will continue to grow substantially in the coming year. His perspective is that we're only getting started. Unlike in the 1970s, when Volcker and Bergen declared war on inflation, politicians now are doing the exact opposite and embracing it. More money printing is being discussed to fund various stimulus measures. Our current Federal Reserve Board has no plans to raise the interest rate, which is currently essentially zero, and an increasing number of people are quitting their jobs. Despite the fact that millions of people are still unemployed, America is unable to fill its labor gap. You know something's wrong when Schiff skips right over gold and instead recommends non-perishable items as a method to weather the storm. One may argue that people like Schiff have been predicting significant inflation for the past 10 years, and that if you predict doom for long enough, you will finally be correct. But regardless on the matter how you look at it, Peter's warning about inflation from 10 years ago is finally coming to fruition, and what happens next will be fascinating from a financial standpoint. And with that, today's video comes to an end. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to show your love and support for the video. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell right next to the subscribe button to be the first to know when a new video like this is posted. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and we hope you had a great time. We hope to see you again soon.